Stop talking. Good morning and welcome to the latest masterclass for the 2023 Family Business Summit with me, Paul Andrews, your host and founder of Family Business United. It's a delight this morning to welcome Bev Mitchell, who is a leading expert in all things family business, but purpose, values and culture. So Bev, good morning.
Good morning, Paul.
Nice to see you, and we're looking forward to the session. So I think we should delve straight in. Tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and let's get into the meat of what this is all about.
Okay, fabulous. Thanks very much, Paul. And good morning, everybody. I hope no one's too adversely affected by the terrible weather we're having today. So yes, what I want to do today is just to spend some time looking at the potential influence and significance that your values and purpose can have for you as a family business. And I know this is a hot topic. I know that it's something that's very front of mind for everybody. And I know actually values and purpose are something that are absolutely so close to the heart and intrinsic in everything that family businesses do. So I hope I can provide you with some useful information and maybe some thought-provoking questions and things for you to go ahead and consider today. So just briefly then, let me just tell you a little bit about me. And if I can just get the slides to behave themselves, which they, oh, there we go. Okay, you see the next slide, Paul?
Everything is brilliant.
So a little bit about Bev Mitchell Consulting. It was founded in 2015 by myself, and the focus of the business is on two very specific areas. The first one is the one where we're going to focus today, and that's all around helping family businesses to really leverage your unique values and culture during all stages of your family business journey. So whether that be in your very early stages, maybe first gen, when you don't perhaps even have any values and culture explicitly laid down right now, right the way through to when businesses are developing and growing, maybe expanding and acquiring, and then almost, when they're maybe third, fourth generation in, even looking to reinvent themselves as a business. So that's the work that I do. And also linked to that very closely is something that we've expanded into just this year, and that's supporting senior leaders with coaching to enable them to create a sustainable long-term impact, not just for themselves, but for their organization and for their people. And for me, the values and culture and the leadership of a family business are so intrinsically linked that those two things seem to go together so well, and have been asked so many times by leaders about coaching that those it seemed to make perfect sense to focus this business on those two areas. But today we're going to primarily look at the values and culture, but we will also end by looking at your role as leaders in that values and culture piece. So why family businesses then? Why is that something that that I was even interested in doing? Why go into family businesses? Well, for me, it's a very personal story. I spent 25 odd years in corporate life before I started Bev Mitchell Consulting, and much of that time was spent working for or with family businesses. So I personally, absolutely personally, felt the difference that being in a family business made. It felt really different. I felt I know how I felt about working for the company, how my colleagues felt, the impact it had on customers, and how it gave us a competitive advantage. But I just wanted to share with you very briefly a particular reason why family businesses resonated for me and why it had to be family businesses when I started BMC. The picture on the left you can see there is a picture of my son when he was born. He was born 13 weeks premature. He was a twin. Unfortunately, his sister did die a few hours after they were born. And the reason I'm sharing that story with you is because of the way the family business, big global business that I was working for at the time, reacted to me in the situation that I was in. The support was just amazing. from the business as a whole, from my colleagues, from our customers, and they helped me to raise £27,500 for the hospital that basically enabled my son to survive. And you can see there he is on the right hand side of the picture now. He's not a tiny baby anymore, but one of the real drivers for founding BMC was to enable me to have a balance between being Tom's mum and to be able to give him the support that he needs, because he has autism and learning difficulties, to balance that with being a successful business owner. And that's what I try to do with the leaders that I work with when I'm coaching them. Is one of the things I help them to do is to have that balance, because it can be incredibly difficult to be successful in business and also successful in your private and family life as well. So that's a little bit of my story. That's why for me it had to be family businesses, because I felt it, I've experienced it, and I know the massive difference it can make, and can be a huge advantage to you, both with your people and with your customers. And we'll come on to look at that in a bit more detail in a minute. So what are we going to do today? We're going to look at the importance of purpose and values, then go on to look at, how, if you don't have them currently, how you go about defining the purpose and values. How do you keep your values relevant when you have them established? How do you make sure that they don't just sit there as words on a page or words on a wall, and they don't live anymore? And what happens when you decide that actually you may need to refresh your values, that maybe they're not as relevant as they were? And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. And then absolutely critically, we'll look at the link between values and culture. And then finally, as I've already said, we'll look at the vital role of leaders in living your values. And then hopefully there will be time for questions. And I'm sure Paul will pull me off with his imaginary shepherd's crook if he thinks I'm going on for too long. So let's jump into it then and look at the importance of your purpose and values. And for me, it's really, really simple. If you do it right, if you really leverage it correctly, your purpose and your values, then I absolutely, totally believe that is has the potential to be your USP. That is your pot of gold. That is that can differentiate you. It's your particular company DNA. Your purpose and values will influence your decision making, what decisions you make, how you decide and where you decide to invest your money. Everything, all the decisions you make should be driven by the purpose and values of your business. Your company culture absolutely should be informed and driven by the purpose and values that you have. And we'll go on to look in more detail about what that might look like specifically, and how the values and the culture are totally linked. And then finally, it has the capacity to impact your long-term business success. I absolutely believe that. And if we think about some of the family businesses that we have in the network that are third, fourth, maybe fifth, even sixth generation, those values have clearly had a massive impact on the success of that business. But then if we look more widely in terms of how you differentiate yourself and how you really use that USP, then your purpose and values help you to differentiate yourself with your people. Now more than ever, I would say we need everything in our armory to try and attract and retain our people. And I know from speaking to many family business leaders over the last few weeks, people is absolutely front and centre and top of both the priority list, and also I think the challenge and worry list right now is, how do we attract the right people? How do we retain them? Because what people are looking for is different. But I think if you've got your values right and you live to them, you're true to them, and it filters down amongst everything that you do, then you do have the potential for that to be a real USP with your people, just as it was for me all those years ago working for that still very, very successful global family business, where I wouldn't have even considered going anywhere else after what they did for me when I really, really needed them. Then if you think about your customers and your suppliers, again, I think your customers, absolutely, that your values and your purpose and your culture, really, you have the potential for that to be a USP with your customers, for that to differentiate you from everybody else. What makes you different from a faceless corporate? What makes you different from other family businesses? What is it that they're going to get from you? How are they going to feel when they deal with you? That's all about your values. Same with suppliers. You know, our suppliers are absolutely crucial. They impact the service, the product we can supply to our customers. So again, if you're differentiating yourself with them by your values, then they're much more likely to have closer partnerships with you, to want to work with you, especially if you find that your values and their values are aligned. That's when there's a real sweet spot when it comes with suppliers. And also the wider market. You know, you want to position yourself in the wider market and really leveraging your values as a really great way of doing that. And I've seen that recently with some of the newer family businesses that are out there that are really doing things differently. They are pioneering, they're pushing the envelope, they're not doing the easy stuff, they're trying to change behaviors, and the values, the intrinsic values that they have that is driving them forward are really helping to differentiate themselves in the wider market and even change the market itself. So for me, your purpose and values, massive, massive potential, but you have to do something about that. It doesn't just happen by magic. And that's what we're going to go on to and look at in a bit more detail now. So how do you start defining your values and your purpose? Well, many of you on this call will probably already have some values defined, written down, shared, lived to varying degrees already. But when a business is first starting out, then certainly the business founder has a massive impact on the values to start with. And I've seen this multiple times in multi-generational family businesses. As you can see, the families, third and fourth gen, refer right back to that first generation founder and how they really shaped the values, what was going to be important to the company going forward. And that's absolutely true. So your own personal values as a family business owner, as a leader, are definitely going to help define what you want the values to be for your business. Because as the owner or the leader of that business, if you don't really connect with, if those values, you can't live them, then then it's just not going to work. So really, really important that your own personal values are going to be reflected in there, particularly if you're starting off and starting to define the values of your business. Maybe you don't currently have them specifically defined. And linked to that is what's important to you. You know, what are absolutely critical? I think the important thing about values is you don't have a massive list of them. So one of the hardest things when we're defining our values is to keep the list relatively small and focused, and thinking about what's really important to you and how you want to be seen out in the marketplace with customers, with people, is really going to help you decide which values are most important to you. And then linked to that is obviously what's important to your customers. You know, we're all in business to, we need to have customers to be in business. So I think the really important thing to think about with values is not to think about them just internally, about what it means to your people and your company internally, but what's important for your customers. What type of company do they want to deal with? How do they want you to behave? How do they want to feel when they are working with you? So it's really important to think about the customer perspective as well. And as we've already mentioned, absolutely critical, what's important to your people. And that may change over time. And we'll come on to look at that in a minute. And then finally, how do you want your company to be perceived? And that sort of links into everything we've talked about, really, is what do you want people externally to look at your company and think, I totally know what they stand for. Their values are really clear. I know what kind of business they are. I know how they want to be, how they want to behave, what impact they want to have in the long term. So really think about that as well when you're defining your values, and also potentially when you're looking to maybe redefine or refresh your values as well. So how do we keep values relevant? I wanted to say this because I think it's really important. Values with because of the nature of family businesses, where they're often multi-generational, those values may have been the same since the business was first founded, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We will come on to look at, though, when you might need to relook and potentially look to refresh your values and see if they're relevant. But I would say that now more than ever, we need to be asking ourselves how our values are helping us with all the things that are going on right now within the world today, the business world today. And the first one is something that I've already mentioned, is this this real war for, I say war for talent. Everyone says war for talent, but really what it's about is how are you attracting the right people, and how are you retaining them, and how are your values and how is your culture helping you to do that. I had a conversation with a family business leader a couple of weeks ago, and he was expressing his concern and saying, you know what, I'm not sure the culture right now in our business is going to attract young people. I've got some very long tenured employees, but I'm looking at our office environment and the way it feels to work here, and I'm not sure that young people coming in here would be attracted to work for me. And that really concerns me because they are the future of my business. So I think it's about taking a look at your values and your culture and saying, are they really working for us? Are they helping to attract and retain people? Next one, again, it's a huge topic, and rightly so, is how are our values reflecting and supporting the whole area of diversity and inclusion? Is that something that we feel as a business we need to be calling out more explicitly within our values? Is it time that we re-looked at that? I'm not suggesting that it has to be, but what I am suggesting is that you think about all the dynamics, everything that's happening in the marketplace right now, and saying, right, are our values still absolutely relevant, and are they really working their best for us? I think another area as well is obviously the whole challenge that that many companies have had around Brexit, and how that's reduced some of the available workforce, particularly in areas such as hospitality and various other sectors, such as construction and other areas. So our values need to work even harder for us, really, because if we've got a smaller pool of people, we really need to be using everything in our armory to go out and attract and retain those people. And I think if you really leverage your values well, then that can help you do that. And technology, my goodness, technology is running so quickly. I'm not sure any of us can really truly keep up with it. But areas such as AI, what does that mean for your values? For example, if you've got integrity as one of your values. Are there any implications for that if you're using AI in your business? Is that, I don't know, could that be potentially, will it give a different impression to your customers? Do you need to be open about the way that you're using technology? Is there something that needs to be reflected in your values if technology is going to be hugely important to you going forwards? Just some things to think about. And then the last area really is around the whole competitiveness of the market. We know that in many cases there's less money out there for people to spend, or people are really thinking hard about where they invest their money. So how do you use your unique values, your unique culture and purpose to ensure that you are getting a fair chunk of the opportunities that are out there? So just sort of some things to consider, particularly in the current situation that we're in.
Bev, can I just drop in just quickly a question for you? We know that Gen Z is an important population of the workforce. By 2030, I think 50% of the workforce will be Gen Z or Gen Z, depending on how you want to say it.
Yeah.
They are academic achievers. We heard that yesterday in one of our summit sessions. So highly achieving people that can focus when they want to. They're perceived by many to be unfocused and flitting from one thing to the other, but we know that when they want to, they're getting good degrees, better degrees than years gone by in terms of qualification. So good quality workforce. Appealing to them, as you say, in terms of values, how do you think values can help the TikTok generation, the people that want to be sold the story, but then you have to deliver that story from day one and not renege on it? What sort of things are you seeing that people can do to make those values come to life?
I think there's first thing I would say about that, Paul, and you're absolutely right, is when I'm talking to Gen Zers, the younger people, and talking to them about where they are choosing to go when it comes to work, the number one thing for them is, do my values align with those company values? That's the very first thing they're looking for. They're looking for that alignment. So they're saying, yeah, and that's why I'm saying about, keeping your values relevant. And when sometimes it may be time to have a look at those and saying, are they still relevant to the current generation? Do the current generation look at that? And I'm not talking about, silly things, but it's, it's like, is it going to be really important to them that there's, that things like empowerment or really putting people at the center of everything that you do, flexibility, those sorts of things. It's really about thinking about what they value, and not obviously changing your values totally just to look at that one particular area of the workforce, but it's just asking yourself that question. And I think the other thing as well, Paul, as you rightly said, it's okay selling the story. And that's really where the culture comes in, because I think we can do a great job at the recruitment stage and say, well, these are our values, this is what we live by, this is how we run our business, this is what it's like to work here. If when they get there, the culture doesn't reflect what you told them. So, for example, if you say, we're a very open and honest culture, we really value that communication, we value really highly. They then get into the organization and find that their particular line manager never gives them any feedback on how they're doing, then very quickly they will see that what they've been sold at the interview stage doesn't align with how the culture actually performs on a day-to-day basis. And that's why it's really crucial that everybody within an organization is aligned with and is behaving in line with the culture and values of the business, because otherwise it falls down. It's not just about the leadership, it's about everybody. And I think that is really critical, not just the Gen Zers, but for any employee.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. But I just think the Gen Z have got more of a motivation. They want to make a difference. They're empowered. They're into change. And you're right. They want to know that their values are aligned. So they can make a difference. And they've got side hustles. They've got other things going on in their life. So work-life balance is, it's really important.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I'm encouraging leaders to think about their own work-life balance as well, because as we'll go on to look at later, as leaders, you are living examples of your values and culture. So if you're not living them, it's a case of do as I say, not as I do, then it undermines everything underneath.
No, I totally agree.
So when potentially might it be worth considering if it's time to refresh your values? And I've just given a few examples here of when potentially it might be worth a look. You might look and then say, no, they're still absolutely fine, they're still absolutely relevant. But when your business is changing and evolving, so, if you're moving into new markets, adding new product ranges in, looking at new geographies, then I think it's definitely worthwhile having a look at the values and the culture and saying, does this still fit? Is it still relevant? Is it reflective of what we're trying to do now, and the areas that we're moving into? I think, and very much linked to that, is when you feel that your values are no longer reflecting the business you aspire to be. And again, that can change, over time, as markets change, as situations change, businesses particularly that have been in existence for many, many years, you grow just like an individual. It grows, it changes, the shape changes, and maybe the company you aspired to be when it was first founded is not the company you aspire to be now. And if that's the case, does that mean you need to relook at those values and say, are they reflecting what we aspire to be? Sometimes when there's a new generation of leadership in a family business, the new gen may come in and say, you know what, I'm not personally connecting with all of these values. They don't feel right to me anymore, or certainly maybe one or two aren't resonating with me. As a new leader, I want to come in, I want to get the opportunity to have a new look at those and look at how we take the business forward into the next generation. And we've already talked about this, but I think when you start to feel that the values are no longer relevant for your people or the potential people that might join your organization, again, it's worth a relook and saying, are these still relevant? Going back to what we said before, Gen Zers and younger people, they're not necessarily looking to stay with the same company their entire career. In fact, they're not. Whereas, 20, 30, 40 years ago, that was something that people were looking for, and they were looking for the values of a company that would offer them that. That's not so relevant now. So, looking at what's relevant for your people now, I think is really important. And also thinking about your values in terms of being a differentiator with competitors. I've seen this happen many times where successful family businesses have really been able to leverage their values to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. And then guess what happens? Their competitors go, I like the look of those values. They're good. They seem to be attracting the customers that I want to attract as well. I think we'll have some of those. And you suddenly find that what was a differentiator is become a me too in terms of values. Now, I'm not suggesting that you throw all those out of the window, because if they are still absolutely relevant to you, then you probably need to look at how you can try and work those harder, or really explain how your particular values, although they might have the same words as a competitor's values, how do they really differentiate you? And then finally, when we're thinking about family businesses and how they evolve and they may go on to then acquire other businesses, is what does that mean? If you acquire another business, one of the things you would obviously be looking at for acquisition is where you've got common values and culture, because that's often a key indicator of whether that acquisition, when an integration, is going to be successful. But are there things coming from the acquired business from a values and culture perspective that you think, you know what, if we had that would strengthen our business even further? So these are some of the key times when you might think it's worth a look and a look about, whether you want to refresh your values. And there's some key steps to use that I would suggest when you're doing a values refresh. First one, really clearly, is identify what's driving the need for the change in values. So which of those things we talked about on the previous slide, what makes you think that you need to maybe take another look at your values? Then identify what the success criteria is for you. So are you talking about a massive revamp? Are we talking about a slight tweak? Are we just talking about keeping the values exactly how they are, but maybe describing them better or differently? So what is success going to look like for you? How big is this values refresh? And then I would definitely recommend that you identify and get some external help to help you do this. And the reason I say that is values are so, part of the heart of a business, which is fantastic. The only downside to that is sometimes it's difficult to take a dispassionate view, to take an external view, a fresh view, and say, okay, we need to really look at this. We need to challenge whether this is right. We need to really think about how we're going to do this and how we're leveraging those values. And having an external perspective, someone that's coming in unbiased, no history, that can give you that perspective is incredibly helpful. And I've seen that work really well. Identify who your key stakeholders are. So who are you going to get involved in this values refresh? Is it just going to be the senior leadership team? I would suggest not, but is it going to be that? Are you going to involve your people? How are you going to do that? Customers. Are you going to involve your customers in this? I would absolutely recommend. I've seen some fantastic feedback from customers, really asking them what they value about your values or what they feel is missing from your values. So think about who you want your stakeholders to be, and then create a process to involve those stakeholders, whether it's one-to-one interviews, focus groups, discussion groups, surveys, however you're going to do it. Create a communication plan, absolutely critical. People need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's the end game, so that they feel involved. And then identify, absolutely crucially, if you do then come up with slightly different values to the ones that you had before, identify how you're going to ensure that those values can be translated into your culture, because they mean nothing until it filters down to the day-to-day and how people are behaving on a day-to-day basis. So let's go on to look at then the link between values and culture. And to me, it's really very simple. Your culture are your values in action. So your values will sit there, as I've said, they may be, they'll be up on your website, they may be up on the wall, they may be, on your homepage as soon as people open their computer in the morning. But it's your culture where the rubber really hits the road. So let's just go on to look a little bit about that. So what is culture? Well, very simply, it's the way that we do things around here. So it's the way decisions are made. It's how feedback is given, how people, what behaviour is rewarded and recognised, who gets promoted, how do we handle bad news? That's often a real key indicator of the type of culture you have. Culture is easier when everything's going well. But I think it can be very telling on, if we've got some bad news, if we have to let people go, how do we do that? And is that in line with our values? So your culture is all about that. And just giving a few examples really of how values can translate into your culture. So for example, these are a list of sort of values that I see in businesses all the time. If innovation is one of your values, then how that translates or should translate to your culture is, are you rewarding risk-taking and experimentation? Because if you're not, then the values and the culture aren't linked. If you want innovation, then you need to reward risk-taking and experimentation. So how about then transparency? If transparency is a key value, then in your culture, you have to ensure that all your communication is open and honest, both the good news and the bad news. Teamwork. This is often a key one for Gen Zers around, teamwork. You say teamwork is a core value of ours. Well, then the culture will then expect and will reward people that work collaboratively as opposed to people that working in individual silos. Integrity. Then ethical considerations will have to drive any decision making you make, and that may often mean that overrides financial drivers. If integrity is a key one, sometimes you'll be making the right ethical decision rather than necessarily the one that's going to save you or make you the most money. Customer centricity, absolutely key one. Customer satisfaction has to be at the heart of everything you do, and sustainability, one that's coming out more and more. Then your decisions are going to be driven by the longer term lasting impact that you're having. So these are just a few examples of how those two, the values and the culture, can link together. One thing I would say though, and this is a word of caution, is that I said right at the beginning, your values can truly be your USP, but everyone has to live them. And I mean every part of your organisation. I had an experience recently with a very large business that I purchased something from, and it was fantastic. The whole purchase experience, the sales experience was great. They really were living the values, and I felt it as a customer. But unfortunately, when it came to the delivery element of what I've purchased, it was anything but living by the values. And I believe that delivery part was outsourced. So you've really got to think about your organisation, and particularly when it comes to customers, who is going to impact that customer experience? And is everybody within that customer experience part, are they all living those values? And how can you make sure they are, even if it's an outsourced part of your business, or another geographical location, or whatever it might be? How do you ensure that? Because if there's one chink in the armor, then everything falls down, and your values can be very, very quickly undermined. So just a note of caution there. And then finally, the vital role of leaders in living your values. We've mentioned this already several times, but you as leaders, you cast a long shadow. You will be impacting the values and the culture of your organisation in everything you say and do. Whether you do that consciously or subconsciously, people are looking to you to set the example of your values in action. So you have to be really aware of that. If there's a mismatch between the leader's behaviours and the values, it can have a huge destabilising effect. So don't think just about yourself, but think about your senior leadership team and the leaders below that. Is everybody in your organisation always acting and behaving in line with your values and your culture? And if not, what do you need to do about it? You have a role to clearly communicate what the values mean in practice. And just a final sort of note of caution. Often as leaders, we are totally aligned and connected with our values. In family businesses, we may have been brought up with them since being little. Don't assume that everybody in your organisation connects to the values in the same way that you do. Never make the assumption. Always be really clear on what you expect from people in terms of values are concerned, and be prepared to do something about it if you see people in the organisation not living in line with those values. So a final thought really to leave, and then I'll stop, is really a question: are you fully realising the full potential of your purpose and values in your business? if you want any further information on anything that I've discussed today, you've got all my contact details up there, including the website. On the website, there is a free resource that I've just highlighted there, which is specifically looking at how you can maximize the value of your family business culture to overcome retention challenges. It's a workbook you can work through with your senior leadership team, and that's free to download on the website. So please do feel free, if you think that might be useful, to go ahead and do that. And please feel free to reach out to me in any of the ways that I've listed there. Paul.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for that. Lots and lots of content in there for us to take away and think and apply to the businesses that we either work in or advise. How important is communication to this whole message?
Sorry, say again?
How important is communication?
Oh. Absolutely critical. And I think that's one of the potential dangers, I think, probably more in family businesses than more sort of corporate organizations, is because the values and the culture are, the family business leaders are so close to it. As I say, they've probably lived it their entire lives. There is a danger that you can make the assumption that everybody understands it in the way that you do. So communication, consistent communication at all levels, in all ways, is absolutely crucial. And any time there is an opportunity to, you know, if there's a decision made, or anything that's done in the organization, if you can link that back to the values and culture, then what that does is constantly re-embed it, and people can see, okay, I see why we're doing that. I see why I'm being asked to behave in that way. I can see why they've been rewarded and promoted, because they are living the values, they're living the culture in this way. All of those things help to communicate and embed.
Yeah, you mentioned the word embed twice there, so I have to ask the question, what are the best ways that people can embed their culture and their values into their organizations?
There are multiple ways. The absolute number one way is for the leaders to live them, is to, as I said right at the end there, I can't overestimate how much of an impact the leaders can have on the values and the culture, because the minute they do anything which is slightly out of step with what the values and the culture say, it just makes people look around and go, oh, hold on a second, I thought we were supposed to do that, but that they've done that. So it has to start there and then go all the way through. Consistency is really, really important, and not missing any little pockets of either parts of the business or a different location or a newly acquired business or anything, because anything that isn't consistent will undermine what you're trying to do.
And it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of leadership and the pandemic? We've been through a pandemic recently. Businesses closed down on day one, some with seriously thousands and thousands of staff, as you say, in different offices, different locations. And we saw CEOs really step up and live their values by communicating, taking themselves out of their comfort zones and doing webinars to all staff at all levels on a regular basis. So living the dream, or living that vision and delivering it in a different way, is something that we've started to see more of. And I guess what I'm hearing from you is we need to embrace social media in different ways to get our values and culture message to the broader population.
Yeah, and I think from a leader's perspective as well, it's all about that authentic leadership and personalizing it. I think if you can give your own personal stories as to, what do the values mean to you? What does the culture look like? When perhaps if you had to make difficult decisions, or even let people go because they're not living the values and the culture, I think the more that leaders can personalize that and share their story, that resonates with everybody, and particularly younger employees, but it resonates with everyone when they're prepared to be a little bit more vulnerable and more authentic, and share a bit more of themselves.
And I guess my last question for you, without ending on a negative really, but what do you see as some of the biggest mistakes that people make in this area?
I think probably the biggest one is making assumptions, is assuming that because I know what the culture and values are and I live them, that everybody else is doing that, or also making the assumption that the values that have served us for the last 100, 150 or whatever it is years should never be re-looked at and re-examined. So I think it's assumptions, complacency, I would say, because if you do that, you're not leveraging that unique USP, and that's where I feel the power is. And so you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't tap into that superpower.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen, and we've all been to businesses, we visit them on a regular basis, where you know the DNA and the culture when you walk in the door. From the moment that the receptionist greets you with a warm smile and a story, and tells you stories about their life in the business and how they've been, whatever's happened, they respect right from the moment you walk in the door, and you can see it all throughout the business. And it's not, as you say, it's not just words on the wall or words on a document, it's how that comes to life. It's been breathed and reinforced 24 hours a day.
Yeah, everywhere, because that is the other thing, as I say, it's happened, I've seen several examples of it now, where just a small part of a really great business has let the rest of it down.
Yeah, Bev, today's been fantastic yet again. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Plenty of food for thought. We will share this and share the content that you've mentioned, and all the details with our audience going forward. Thank you again for joining us on the summit. If I could just ask you to stop the recording for me and share everything afterwards, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
But values at the core of every family business that we know, and actually making the most of them is really important. So Bev, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome.